I'm ready when you are ready.
We have so many different stories that we can be telling. And I have a whole passload of stories in my head, and I was trying to decide which one to tell. We could do Irish stories, I could do a German story, I could do a Russian story, a Middle Eastern story, but I said, you know, why not? We're in Texas. Let's do an American story. So the story I'm going to tell you tonight is about Curly Joe Moskowicz, the best Jewish cowboy you done ever seen. And I do it in the character of Slim Hopkins, his best friend. Now, there really was people, Jewish cowboys. We just don't hear about them. But there really were. So this is the story of Curly Joe Moskowicz and his last cattle drive. My name is Slim Hopkins, and I want to tell you about one of the best stories that I have, about one of the best cowboys I have ever been around. His name was Curly Joe Moskowicz. Now, we had all heard about him from the other cowboys, and we had all heard about him from the other cattle drives. But this is the first time I had ever worked with this man. And it was one of those cattle drives. We were up in Fort Worth, Texas, and we were going to drive them all the way up to the Stockyards in Chicago. Now, there was quite a bit of us there. And Curly Joe, well, he was a tall man. He was a strong man. And they called him Curly Joe because he had this really thick hair of curls, black curls. And he had eyes the color of black slate. And he was one of the nicest people you'd ever been around. But I had never been around no Jew boy before. And he told me all about himself. He told me about how he came down here from New York because he was tired of it. He wanted to do something different. And he made a name for himself for being one of the best cow punchers you'd ever seen. He was very nice to the ladies. Like, I had heard one story when he was with a bunch of other cowboys in one of the saloons out in Long Branch. And one of the men started getting really, really fresh with one of the bar girls. And he went over and he said, "Sir, you will treat her with respect." And this man looked at him and said, "And who do you think you are?" He said, "My name is Curly Joe Moskowicz." "Curly Joe Moskowicz, that's a strange name for a man." He said, "You better be nice to this lady. Lady, my ass, she ain't no lady, she's a bar girl." And next thing you know, Curly Joe's fist, boom, right in the man's face. He said, "You do not talk to a lady like that." So that's the type of man he was. He respectified the ladies, and they respectified him. And there were quite a few of them that really would like to do a little bit more than respectify him, but he said, no, 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 no. I am going to Chicago because I'm going to marry my beloved Tovah. Now, we was promised to each other when we were kids, and we loved each other, and I told her that as soon as this cattle drive was over, we was going to get married up in Chicago. So we set out on that last cattle drive that he worked on from Fort Worth to Chicago Stockyards. And we were going along, and Curly Joe got to know me, and I got to know him. And we talked about our families, and we talked about our belief systems, and we talked about our traditions. But I tell you this, the man was really the nicest person you've ever seen. And I remember one time how he broke down in tears when he found a dead calf on the drive. And he cried over that poor little baby calf. But what he did was so nice. He took it and he put it outside so the coyotes could feed their babies also. And he took care of us, and we took care of him. And on Friday nights, when we were all sitting around the campfire, Curly Joe would go off by himself, and he would take out this long shawl from his saddlebag, and he'd put it over his head. And he would do his feet like this, and he would start praying. Now, I asked him about that, and he said, "Well, you know, boy, it's like this. Us Jew people, our Sabbath is Friday night, and I always like to try to do that." And I said, "Okay, that's fine with me. But why come you don't eat what we eat?" And he says, "Well, it's a special type of food I have to eat. That's why I've got my own. But I will have coffee with you in the morning." So we had coffee in the morning. We got on our horses, and we started that cattle drive. And the next thing you know, here comes some Indians. And Curly Joe knew them. I think this man knew everybody on this side of the Mississippi River, because they always waved at him, and he went up to them. He went up to these Indians. He says, and the Indian looked at him, and he said, now, I don't speak Apache, but I think he was trying to tell them that we were nice people and not to bother us. So the Indians came and they talked with us, and they bought some of our cows. It was okay, you know, but we didn't have to worry about it. And we parted friends. And we kept on that cattle drive. We kept on going, and we finally got to the outskirts of Chicago, and we got them cattle into the stockyards, and we done checked into one of the hotels downtown. And Curly Joe said, Slim, my friend, because you are a dear, dear friend of mine, I would like for you to be the best man at my wedding. And I said, Curly Joe, I don't know nothing about no wedding that you're going to be doing. He says, look, I'll tell you all about what you do. You get 3 other boys. Y'all get yourself all shined up. You get yourself all purtified. And you're going to hold the chuppah. I think that's what he called it, a chuppah. But it was this big tent with 4 poles, and the men held it. So the next day, which happened to be a Saturday, that was going to be the wedding. We showed up at that synagogue, and we was all purtified. I had on my best shirt. I had on my best string tie. I had polished up my buckles. We couldn't take our guns in. And I polished up my shoes, and we all polished up our shoes, and we were a fine-looking group of men. So we walked in, we took our hats off, and I encouraged us, you keep your hats on. You know, okay. So here we walked down the aisle. And the little rabbi said, now you hold this pole, and you hold this pole, and you hold this pole, and you hold this pole. And we were a fine-looking group of cowboys. We were all spit-shined and purty. And we held those posts of that chuppah. And the next thing you know, everybody stood, and here comes Curly Joe down. And I'd never seen him dressed like this before. He looked like 5 cents on a dollar. He looked so good. And he had this little hat on, right, you know, about like this. I didn't ask him about it because we were in the middle of the service. I knew better than to do that. So then all of a sudden I looked, and like a sugar wedding cake, Tovah comes walking down the aisle. She was so pretty and all white. She looked like one of them fancy French pastries. She was all sugar-fied and purtified. And they got up there, and we held the poles of the chuppah, and the rabbi did his blessing over them, and they exchanged their rings. And the next thing I know, they was breaking a wine glass under his shoe. Now, I think that's a wasted crystal, but I understand it's part of their tradition. So everybody went mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, or whatever that means. So we all went out, and we went down to the local saloon, and they had the reception there. And there was dancing, and there was music, and there was food, and we all danced around. The men danced with the men, and the women danced with the women in these circle dances, holding handkerchiefs. This is something new to me. But you know, Curly Joe was my best friend, and I was proud to be his man of honor. And the next thing you know, let me tell you about this. This is the strangest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. They put Curly Joe in a chair, and they put Tovah in the chair, and they lifted them up, and they danced around with them. And the people were clapping, and they were singing, and they were shimmifying, and we grabbed them, and we danced around. We just did our cowboy dances. They were holding on for dear life, because you know they will fall off. And that was the most fun I'd had in a long time. And we put them down. And then the rabbi said, does anybody have a special dance for these young couple? So I got the other boys together. We went out there, and we did a cowboy dance for them. And we kicked up our heels. And we danced. And people just clapped along. Of course, the orchestra didn't know our music. But, you know, they tried. Now, they tried. They made a good effort. They tried. And it was the bestest time. About 5 hours later, when everybody was falling down dead drunk and tired, we decided to go back to our hotel, stagger back to our hotel. And we went back because we knew the next day we was coming back to Texas. So the next morning woke up and, oh, you talk about a headache, you talk about feeling like something the cat done drug in. That's how I felt. That wine was sweet. Whew, it was sweet. I much prefer beer. So I went and I paid my respects. And I said, Curly Joe, Miss Tovah, I am so happy that I was here for your wedding. Now we're going to miss your husband, Miss Tovah. He was a good cowboy. He knew what he was doing, and he kept us all safe. And Miss Tovah, she just blushed. And she curtsied and says, thank you very much. And I hugged Curly Joe. He kissed me on both cheeks. Now, that's the first time a man done kissed me. You know, that's what they say you're supposed to do when you say goodbye. And so we said goodbye. He gave me his address, and I said, I'd try to write to you, but you know, I don't write too good because I didn't go beyond 4th grade anyway. And so we went on home. Now, I tried writing him a letter. I don't know if it got to his house. I don't know what he's doing now. All I know is that Curly Joe Moskowicz was one of the best friends I done ever had. And he was one of the best cowboys I ever had. And he was the first Jew friend I ever had. And I am proud to say we had a good time.